Hey everyone, welcome to this podcast called Ken Reads, where I can read out your letter that you've shared with me in the hopes that I can better help you understand what the F just happened between you and the last partner you were dating, whether it was in a relationship or a situationship. I look at these experiences from the lens of attachment theory. I don't just come up with thought terminating cliches like, they're just not that into you, or if they wanted to, they would. While some of those phrases might have their benefit in other dynamics, I try and look at this from the lens of, is there perhaps an insecure attachment issue that's at play in these particular dynamics? And though I am an Australian counsellor, I am not someone who is going to be responding to these letters as if I was with a client. I'm here to provide validation, yes, but I can't provide any diagnoses on these. So even if, a lot of people might understandably hear this and be like, well, that sounds like a narcissist. At best, I'll probably say, sounds a bit narky. I probably won't go any further than that out of respect to my ethical boundaries in regards to what I can and can't do. If you find this of benefit to you, fantastic. That's what I want. And if you want to submit your letter, you're very welcome to once there is obviously availability per month. And I'll happily read out and share my own 2 cents as to what I think has gone on in your dating experience to offer you a sense of validation for what you've been through and also to give other people listening a chance to feel like maybe this relates to what they've also experienced as part of collective healing. So with that all out of the way, let's dive in to the latest letter. Our next letter comes from Marissa. Marissa writes, Hi Ken, I want to start by thanking you for all the good you do in your work. The validation and knowledge that you provide in your open channels means a lot. I must have listened to one of your conversations with Tawny Lovelace over 10 times. That is the only content I have found online that describes what I've been through. Firstly, Marissa, thank you very much for the kind words. If you're referring to the video that I think you might be referring to, which is the one Tawny and I did nearly a couple of years now, where we talked about healing from a dismissive avoidant, that was one of my favorite conversations I've ever done. And thank you very much for the kind words regarding the work I do. Like, honestly, it's a gift to do this for people. Anyways, I hear that you would like to change some of the topics that you're talking about, including talking about how to heal yourself after a relationship with a person with an avoidant attachment, instead of only discussing the avoidant behavior in itself. Yes, I did say that. I'm chuckling because I'm thinking, oh, that's right. Back in my stage where I was like, oh, I just don't want to get too I don't want to get like too caught up in just talking about the same old thing over and over and over again. Because even though I love talking about this, your boy needs a break every now and then. Otherwise, it just gets repetitive. But no, thank you for noticing that. Anyways, um, Marissa adds, well, that's fine by me because I want to talk about healing, not just the behavior too. Fantastic. We're on the same page. Let's go. Marissa writes, I've moved on in the sense that I don't blame myself or my ex for what happened. I have read, listened, and learned a lot about attachment theory, something that was unknown to me before this last relationship. It started 8 years ago when I was 50 years old and met a man 6 years older than me. Now, we were together for 7 years, but during that time, he left me twice and we had long breaks in the relationship. Ugh, ouch. The third time he broke up with me a year and a half ago, I decided not to take him back. We've not had any contact since then. Good on you. Good on you. This sounds to me like we're definitely having what I call a reflective letter. For those of you who've watched some of my content, I also refer to this as like real sort of stage two, stage three of like, how did we get here and like what's happened? But yeah, this is sounding like we're already off to a very different place compared to a lot of other letter writers. And by the way, if you still want to write to me, anyone who's listening, when you're still in the thick of it, trying to make sense of it, that's totally fine. But it's wonderful to get these letters every now and then where the letter writer, like Cindy from a few letters ago, are writing from that perspective of, yeah, I can see things a little bit more clearly now. So let's continue with what Marissa is saying, because this is really interesting. I'm excited to hear what happens. Marissa writes, we never lived together, and the amount of time spent together and the need of space from His side, obviously, was a constant discussion between the two of us. I am myself very independent and don't mind being in my own company, but he still made me feel like I was clingy. I guess I also turned somewhat anxious around him because of his push-pull behavior, even though I'm lucky enough to have a secure attachment. Well, I've got to say, the way you're writing this sounds very secure, so I'm loving this so far, Marissa. Thank you for sharing this. I wanted to enclose a drawing I made of how I experienced our relationship. It tries to illustrate what is so difficult for many outsiders to understand and what also made me endure 7 years of this experience before giving up. So many parts of the relationship and so much of the emotional connection between us were really good, the best I've ever experienced with someone. And at the same time, the avoidant behavior slowly dripped down below the surface level of the relationship and kind of petrified the core of it. Wow. I'd say that in our everyday life together, the avoidant behavior of my ex occupied maybe 15 to 20% of the relationship. I could somewhat cope with it, partly because the rest of it was so good, and partly because I felt sorry for him having had a childhood that forced him to develop this kind of defense mechanism. But the distancing and defense maneuvers kept increasing over time, no matter me understanding and loving him, and it slowly made the core of the relationship frozen. Oh, I love the way you write that. I actually hope that I can show this on my screen if this thing shows. Yeah, here it is. Let's see if I can expand on this. Or actually, I don't know if I can. Oh, the screen's doing some funny things. There we go. I'm just see if I can hold it here. So this is the illustration that Marissa had, where basically the core of the relationship is in the center, and the outside of it is what's referred to as everyday life, where it's referred to as good. And you can't see it because it's off camera, but that everyday life stuff is referred to as like the 85% that is good. And then this avoidant behavior is the top section. I know it's flashing a lot. Sorry, guys, epilepsy warning. And that part is the 15%, which is that avoidant attachment piece. And I think it does a really good job of illustrating how, on the surface, everything can look great. And it goes back to something I've been saying very recently too, which is that 15%, that's the avoidant behavior, is actually 85% of your problem, in that everyone thinks, oh, but it was so good. We had such great times together. It was perfect. It's like, yes, but did you know this person had a massive wall over their heart, their self, and they weren't going to let anyone in, even if you did love them, because their defenses are just outrageous. And so sophisticated. I'm not here to take that away from them, but very strong at, not letting love in, which can be really painful for a lot of people. So yeah, it's brutal. Anyways, Marissa continues. It's really sad to let go of a person that you felt you wanted to grow old with because we'd shared values, had the same sense of humor, our sex life felt genuine, and we had an ongoing litany of interesting conversations that I'd really appreciated. He is gentle, sweet, and intelligent, a man who I loved very much. And I know he loved me, but his fear of intimacy won out over love. When I look back, I think it was only during our first year together. In the infatuation phase, I recognized that he was able to open up to me. But after that, door after door was closed to his inner self. They're probably closed to him as well. Yep, I would probably agree with that, Marissa. During one of our breaks, he bought a couple of books about attachment theory and started therapy wanting to focus on his avoidant attachment. But he stopped only after a couple of times. Classic. I'm now 58 years old. I feel too young to completely give up on a romantic relationship, but at the same time, a bit too old to deal with dating apps and superficial contacts. I've tried to go on a couple of dates, but I've mostly felt sad during them and afterwards. It's become so clear to me how rare it is to meet someone you really want to be with, as I felt about my ex. Can I just take a moment here to say, Marissa, that is the truth of it. It's not to say that you shouldn't, it's not to say that you should give up completely, because I think that's the wrong advice to give people. In fact, I don't think advice is appropriate in this space. But what I'd say is, if I had to share my own 2 cents on this, I truly think that dating to find someone who we're connected with, we feel compatible with, we're attracted to, we feel safe with, we can grow with, it's a tall order. And it's not something where I think anyone is being picky. I think it's hard because many people, particularly those who lean secure, secure leaning, whether they are avoidant or anxiously attached, don't really have the luxury of enjoying romantic relationships with just anybody. I think a lot of us find it's like fishing. You just can't bring back a trout. What you're looking for is something quite substantial. You know it's in the ocean, but it's rare. And you're probably going to have to go fishing quite a few times before you actually reel it in and have this experience that you need. So that's why I want to take a moment to say that I could understand the desperation, the frustration, the struggle, the difficulty in being able to date and to feel that you can find a soulmate, if you will, or a romantic partner when it's bloody hard in this day and age. To anyone who's played Pokemon, it's really like hunting for shiny Pokemon. But anyways, all that is to say is that I think that it truly is very hard to find someone like that. And my attitude is just keep your channels open. Obviously, if you've got social events that you're into, if you've got, things that you like doing on your own or in hobbies that allow you to meet other people, fantastic, because I think there's opportunities to find people. But it is just to say that I do think that it's really difficult in this day and age to find, a good partner, especially after you've had someone who is avoidantly attached to you, you've loved very much, and you can tell they loved you as well too. So yeah, I totally validate everything you've shared there. Anyways, the rest of my life is good, and I've got three children who are now young adults with whom I have a great relationship. Amazing. I have many friends and colleagues at work. I have hobbies and I have a dog and a cat. I'm confident in myself and I'm not afraid of being alone. I live a privileged life in many ways, but I still often feel empty. And I notice that I feel a lot more disappointment and sadness. I don't find socializing with my friends as rewarding anymore. I feel different from them and I often find their conversations superficial. It's probably because I find myself in more existentially vulnerable positions than they do. I feel like I just don't fit in, even though I'm always invited and sought after, and I feel I've lost my place in the world and wonder how to find it again. Okay, that speaks to a much deeper thing, which I think is going on. My hunch on this, you might be going through a bit of a spiritual awakening, an existential crisis, a bit of a dark night of the soul moment. Some of those terms are in the more spiritual camp, but existential crises usually do happen off the back of an avoidant breakup because often due to how painful they are, they rip us open and we often feel very adrift and like we just don't have the same desire to socialize or engage in activities and company that just don't light us up the same way. So, what you're going through is very normal. It's very much par and course. And given the fact that you're 58 suggests to me that it's probably around that time of your midlife crisis, Saturn's return. So, this is very normal for people to go through that, where they feel like, oh God, I feel like I'm unbecoming and learning how to like find my tribe. And it's pretty hard to go through that, particularly if you're like if you're decades down the line, because it may feel like you just don't have the same opportunities you once did, which on one hand is kind of true, but at the same time, I don't want to deny it to anyone because working through that loneliness and that disappointment is going to ultimately yield to a lot of better things in the future. I've been there, done that. It's not fun, but it's part of the process. Just when you thought you were done with the discard, then you have to deal with all the fucking bullshit of working through the existential crises. I know there's no answer to my questions, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on them. How do I move forward in my situation? I value myself, so I don't feel I need to work on my self-worth, but maybe there's something else that I need to work on. I read a lot of literature and also philosophy. I'm not a person who's very into spiritual and new age stuff, but I meditate regularly and am inspired by Buddhism. Well, funny you should mention that. So I guess adding to what I was just adding to your experience, my thing that really helped me was I had to do a lot of journaling about why I was feeling so much disappointment, loneliness, and a lack of satisfaction. And often I found like a lot of those answers came down to ha ha ha, childhood crap, and a lot of trauma that I needed to work on. Like I often find that people who go through this phase start recognizing a lot of the stuff, a lot of their muck, so to speak, that they're no longer happy with. And it's a time for a big reevaluation of goals, purpose. And this is where the meditation's great. Journaling's really important. I would strongly recommend you do some internal family systems work or something where you can at least get a bit closer to what's going on internally inside of you, because often I find that guides people in the direction where their soul is pointing to. So you may find that, as you go through this introspection, you are gently led in the direction of where you need to go, because that's how it was for me and a lot of other people that I know who go through this sort of thing too. People often find they're driven to more service-orientated opportunities and other things. So yeah, I have to say, I'm excited for you. I know it may feel sticky, annoying. You might feel a lot of ennui and boredom and also a bit of depression for where you're at right now. But just sitting with that and finding out what comes up and just being honest with yourself is the start of really undoing a lot of this stuff. One of my therapists, she says to me that every now and then we'll go through these phases where we almost just fall apart a little bit and we see all these like shadowy aspects of ourselves, these parts of us that are a little bit unsavory. And it's an opportunity to meet some of the things that we don't necessarily like about ourselves. And we have to get really radically honest with what's working and not working in our lives to figure out where to move forward from here. So just wanted to add that. But yeah, it's interesting. Marissa ends by saying, I'd like to have a romantic partner again because I really thrive in that kind of closeness. But at the same time, there are very few men that I find stimulating enough to want to be with. It's all kind of feeling like searching for a needle in a haystack. Yeah, tell me about it. With the searching itself being more agonizing than fun. Maybe I should just do better by just letting go of the whole idea of experiencing a loving relationship again and try to reorientate myself towards a different kind of life. To conclude, I circle around the same problem all the time. The disappointment and hurt of having met a person with whom I really felt happy just to realize that his inner world was so deep that it ruined the relationship. I know that he's lonely too, but being avoidant, I guess that loneliness and a loss of closeness doesn't hurt him as much as it hurts me. Thank you for reading, Ken, and all the best to you, Marissa. Marissa, thank you so much for writing this. This was really beautiful and bittersweet. And also, I feel your pain there. Yes, you're right. Your ex may not necessarily allow himself to feel the feelings that you're feeling around this. Doesn't mean he doesn't care. But what I would say is that in my experience with this, I had to get to a point where I almost just said to myself as a bit of a delusional goal, yeah, I know I'm going to meet my soulmate, or I know I'm going to meet, the person that I want to be with. And I just find activities and, do things that I enjoy in order to meet new people and just see where it goes from there. I think it's one of those things where if we become too beholden to the goal and we also try and fixate on, I need someone to be very similar to my ex, it almost robs us and disappoints us from actually just being present with people as well too. I also think as well that when it comes to where you're at right now, I'll just end this off by saying I do think there's probably an opportunity to really dig deep into some of the feelings that are emerging for you, because what you're experiencing now, like I said, is very much that stage 3 of like unbecoming, connecting with yourself and moving on from, and also maybe a little bit of that stage 2 stuff of like, how did I get here with being with a person who was so avoidant as well too. Because even people who've come from relatively secure backgrounds, people may still have, been drinking from the conditioning of emotional unavailability. So I'm going to round out here by saying, Marissa, thank you for such a reflective, almost very somber, poetic, and, very real letter about where you're at. I really appreciated it because personally, I like a break every now and then from not just talking about that's avoidant behavior. Let me get my avoidant bingo card out. This was a really good one for just showing you where you're at, and I can sense that you're in a very different place.